Good morning. Want to begin the public comment now?
Sure. Right. Good morning, good morning. So we're not in our usual location, so a little bit of moving around and getting situated. It's now 9:35, and so I would like to call our meeting to order in February. So first thing we're going to do is go through our public comment. I know we have quite a bit. Great, that's more than we picked. So we're going to go ahead and start with our public comment. Would it be better to start with our virtual public comment first? We certainly can. Okay. Let's start with Rebecca Grove from Hood College. Rebecca, can you hear me?
I can, thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Nice. All
Floor
right.
is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This is Becky Grove from Hood College, Associate Professor of Education. And I'm also here as a member of the Maryland EdTPA Collaborative. Since the performance assessment requirement for teacher licensure has become a topic of focus for this group and for other stakeholders across the state, I would like to take this opportunity to build on the information shared in the letter submitted to this board by the collaborative last week. Maryland has been a leading state in the implementation of EdTPA, and the Maryland EdTPA Collaborative is deeply invested in that work. Over the past decade, we have built a network of teacher educators, LEA partners, and other stakeholders to support each other, and more importantly, to support candidates in the valuable EdTPA process. Last week, many of us were at the Maryland Teacher Education Summit. We heard again and again that quality preparation is central to teacher effectiveness and retention. Linda Darling-Hammond noted, quote, "Lowering standards exacerbates the leaky bucket of teachers leaving the profession." As Dr. Darling-Hammond then outlined the design principles for teacher education, I was struck by how EdTPA strongly supports and aligns with each of the 5 principles. And those principles are available at edpreplab.org if you are not familiar with them. Since we don't have time to unpack all 5 principles today, I will emphasize principle 3, which calls for authentic assessments and rich learning opportunities for candidates. EdTPA is a key part of this in many programs. EdTPA not only assesses candidate skills, it deepens them. It is rigorous, yes, but that's a good thing. There are challenges, true, but we have strategies and resources to address those. Every candidate that I have worked with is a better teacher because of completing the EdTPA process. I want to close my comments by emphasizing the educative value of EdTPA. It is not an isolated program requirement or another test taken at a computer. Candidates learn and grow while completing EdTPA, and then they receive scoring data that can inform their professional development. The collaborative has done promising work around professional growth plans and induction, which we would love to pursue further. And of course, we all know that EdTPA is a great stepping stone in a candidate's progress towards national board certification. Thus, EdTPA serves as both a capstone and a stepping stone in a novice teacher's growth. It is an educative and rigorous process with proven potential to build the profession. I want to thank the board for this opportunity to share about EdTPA and its place in teacher education, and I would welcome the opportunity to continue the discussion. Thank you.
Next, we have Dr. Terry Showers.
Good morning. My name is Terry Showers, and I am the EdTPA Program Coordinator at Bowie State University. I would like to share the importance of EdTPA and its impact on Bowie State University's program improvement and candidates' growth. Bowie State University has a rich history, expanding over a century in teacher education, and today, the university is among the nation's leaders in teacher education. Because of successive accreditation with the National Council of Accreditation of Teacher Education and Council for Accreditation of Educator Preparation, BSU set criteria with specific course requirements, clinical experiences, and assessments for both the university and the state that became the College of Education major. BSU chose EdTPA to fulfill the state's mandate, and teacher candidates must complete EdTPA without any codes as a part of the program requirements needed for graduation. Bowie State University's faculty recognizes the significant value of EdTPA in enhancing our teacher preparation programs. By integrating EdTPA standards into the redesign of our courses, we are proactively ensuring that our candidates are well prepared. This alignment is part of our ongoing effort to provide instruction that not only meets, but exceeds the needs of every child. There are numerous ongoing professional development opportunities, resources, training, monthly meetings, etc., provided by Pearson and the Maryland EdTPA Collaborative for stakeholders, and similar opportunities for candidates. Our consultants, LessonCast, and EdTPA platform provider provides various technological resources and activities for our candidates and stakeholders, and has a state-approved online 3-credit course for our mentor teachers. A Title III grant funds our program and covers the cost of candidates' EdTPA submissions and resubmissions. In closing, EdTPA has both enhanced the BSU teacher education program in many areas and increased the number of qualified novice teachers in the classroom, especially minority teachers. Thank you for your time and allowing me to share comments. Next, I would like to introduce a former graduate of our program, Nilover Ade, who teaches 2nd grade and 3rd grade math in the Howard County Public School System. She is currently a student in BSU Masters of Education program for special education.
Good morning. Starting the program at Bowie State University was surreal. The opportunity offered to me via Howard County Public Schools in partnership with Bowie State University was something I would not have been able to accomplish on my own. The feedback from my professors allowed me to understand the demands of being an educator and the importance of EdTPA. The workshops were extremely helpful in preparing me for the analytical writing and reflective practices that I would need to excel in the EdTPA process. I was able to learn how to effectively plan, teach, and assess students. My experience preparing for the EdTPA required a lot of planning and time management skills. It also required an in-depth understanding of state standards in the Howard County curriculum. I was able to collaborate closely with my mentor teacher and my university supervisor to prepare and reflect on my teaching practices every step of the way. In preparing for EdTPA, I learned the importance of pre-planning for instruction through understanding state standards and knowing your students. The most important part of EdTPA for me was learning to write analytically and reflect on my practices to improve my teaching techniques. Not only did Bowie State Preparation Program teach me how to write lesson plans, but it also taught me how to reflect on those lesson plans and my teaching to make improvements that benefit my learners. EdTPA has made a great impact on my first year of teaching. As a result of EdTPA, I have committed to the cycle of planning, teaching, and reflecting, which is required by the EdTPA to my everyday teaching practices. EdTPA has taught me that to be a great educator, you must plan, instruct, reflect, and repeat. Without my partaking in the EdTPA and the educational program at Bowie State, I would not have been able to excel in my observations and grow as a first-year teacher. The process of EdTPA has put me in a mindset of continuously seeking to improve my instruction. The EdTPA has fully prepared me for my evaluation system used by my district as it relates to all the aspects of the Danielson framework, and I do truly believe that I would have been underprepared without it. I believe the EdTPA process and the Bowie State program have allowed me to be successful in my first year of teaching and should remain a requirement for upcoming teachers. I believe partaking in the EdTPA is what can separate good educators from great educators. Thank you for providing me with the opportunity to reflect on my journey with EdTPA and the impact it has had on my teaching career.
Thank you. Next, we have Dr. Hernandez-Tittle.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the Professional Standards and Teacher Education Board. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Glenda Hernandez-Tittle, and I am the Senior Director of Alternative Certification Programs at Montgomery College. I am also the co-chair of the Maryland ETPA Collaborative. I am here today because I understand there are ongoing conversations about the future of ETPA in the state of Maryland. First, I want to affirm the shared points by the other speakers as it relates to the value that the ETPA performance assessment has had for our candidates' growth and our program quality. Even in accelerated alternative certification programs such as ours, we have used ETPA to support our candidates in developing essential skills to be successful and prepared for the classroom. All teachers are required to go through a key cycle each and every time we teach. These include planning for your learners and taking account their individual needs, delivering that instruction, assessing what we have taught to ensure student learning and progress, and finally, reflecting on the lesson and taking that information to continue to improve our practice. Again, this is a key cycle that we go through each and every day as educators, and this is exactly what ETPA assesses. ETPA is practical, assesses essential skills, and adds quality to our education preparation programs. The Maryland ETPA Collaborative, which began approximately 10 years ago and has members from over 15 institutes of higher education and other teacher preparation programs across the state, has been on the front lines of the ETPA implementation. We know firsthand the value and practicality of the ETPA process and the importance of it to ensure that future teachers are well prepared. I know Maryland prides itself in being a leader in our teacher preparation and quality, and ETPA is an essential and valuable tool that supports this mission. We have joined you today because we wish to be part of the ongoing conversation around performance assessments. We urge you, our leaders and policymakers, to tap into this valuable resource and to allow us, the Maryland ETPA Collaborative, made up of those on the front lines of teacher preparation, to also have a voice at the table when questioning or discussing the value and future of ETPA in Maryland. We welcome you to join our monthly meetings or to schedule other meetings where we can strengthen our communication and collaboration moving ahead. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We'll turn now to those in the room. We do have one person who has signed up, Ms. Jamie Sapia. If you join us at the table, please. Morning. Good morning.
Hey, how's everyone doing? Did everyone get the written testimony?
Yes.
The sit down or what's?
Whatever you're most comfortable with. So let's have the letter. From Cheryl, correct?
Yes. Can I just sit here, I guess? I might just walk around. Hi, good morning. I think I have 3 minutes, so if I start to get close, just yell. My name is Jamie Sapia. I am in-house counsel with the Maryland State Education Association, and on behalf of our over 75,000 educators across Maryland, I'm submitting comments to the proposed regulations to Homework 13-8-12-6, and the proposed changes to these certification regulations. As written, the proposed changes are extremely problematic. Most alarmingly, the amendment giving a state superintendent the ability to summarily suspend an educator's certificate if the state superintendent determines there's a substantial likelihood that the teacher poses a risk of harm to public health, safety, or welfare. This is completely unbridled discretion. And in the face of existing regulations that already outline when a teacher's certificate can be suspended or revoked, as well as an existing process by which it may be accomplished, is simply unwarranted and will likely result in a totally arbitrary application, exacerbating an already complicated licensure process. So just to kind of put it in context, if the state superintendent summarily suspends an educator's license utilizing these proposed changes, a teacher's employment contract is void. That's under Code 13A721, and the local board cannot legally employ that individual as a teacher. So in that situation, the teacher is denied the ability to remain employed. They're denied the ability to fight for his or her job, which is a constitutional due process right that's reinforced under 602 of the Maryland Education Protocol. So essentially, these proposed changes conflict with a teacher's due process rights under the Constitution and 6202 of the Maryland Education Article. So they really just can't legally speak. While it is very unclear, I think, what specific circumstances MSDE envisions in applying this idea of summarily suspending a license, it seems that this will likely occur when a teacher is charged criminally with some offense. So under these proposed regulations, the state superintendent would only need to be presented with allegations of fact, which would be a one-sided charging document from the state's attorney's office. Once the charges are filed, however, that teacher has a constitutional right to remain silent under the Fifth Amendment of the US Constitution. And candidly, there is no credible defense attorney who would allow a teacher to appear before the state superintendent and give testimony to attempt to maintain his or her certification. That could be used against an educator in a criminal trial. No attorney would advise their client to do that. So while it is the employer's prerogative to react if they do receive a charge against a teacher, such as a one-sided charging document from the state's attorney's office, they can place that employee on leave. They can do that. But any subsequent dismissal proceeding in those situations is held in abeyance pending the criminal matter because of that employee's constitutional right to remain silent. Am I at time?
Finish.
Okay, sorry. So, if the motive to adding this provision revolves around summarily suspending a certificate when a teacher is charged criminally with some offense, then it's totally unnecessary because the local board of education already ensures that the teacher is held in limbo pending the outcome of the criminal matter. So they're not around students. There's only one regular contract in the state of Maryland. Those charges are public record. We have seen numerous examples of teachers being overcharged by the state and then being found not guilty. They're completely exonerated. And these teachers are generally allowed to return to the classroom once they've been exonerated. The proposed changes allowing for summary suspension would result in a situation in which educators are essentially guilty until proven innocent and treated as such. They lose the ability to remain employed as classroom teachers as soon as the certificate is suspended. So in short, the proposed amendments allowing for summary suspension run afoul of state and constitutional law. Additionally, there's a proposed change, an attempt to define misconduct and moral turpitude that is also problematic. Ultimately, the court has defined teacher misconduct as a willful and deliberate violation of a standard of behavior that the employer expects of an employee, which bears in an educator's fitness to teach. So more importantly, the use of the words dishonest or improper behavior, they are totally overly broad and vague. And MSDE is required to abide by existing case law as well as state board decisions in interpreting 602 of the article. Similarly, moral turpitude is governed in large part by community standards. There is no static definition, and what MSDE has proposed is again very, very overly broad and vague, rendering it unenforceable. In the case of such vague language, teachers are denied due process. In other words, the employee needs to be provided the rules and policies before they can be terminated for violating them. And the proposed language lacks any necessary guidance, especially when a violation will result in a loss of their license and career. So the regulations already provide that a teacher who resigns or is terminated after allegations of misconduct involving students is subject to having their certificate suspended or revoked. So in closing, we recommend that the board reject these proposed changes to the regulations because these amendments run afoul of the rights afforded under the Constitution and state law. And under the preemption doctrine, the higher authority of law would supersede the lower authority. The higher authority would be the Constitution and the statute, and the lower authority would be Comar. So it would be unsound legally to pass these proposed changes. So thank you.
Thank you. So am I looking at this correctly? We do have two other, we already just considered forms of public comment from the University of Maryland. And,
They are, they're written comment, yes.
okay, so let's take a moment to review these. They're not too long. Typically with the longer public comment, I kind of say let's kind of come back to it. But let's take a moment to review these because they may kind of play into our discussion today. So about another minute, we do need to give Zach the opportunity. He's on limited time, so about another minute. And if we need to kind of go back to finish reading the written public comment, we can.
Can you, let Zach know that he can, or unmute him?
All right, we're gonna we'll change our agenda just a little bit, just because Zach is gonna give our legislative update or state board update. At least he's doing legislative or state board. State board, sorry.
Zach, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah.
Possible.
So he's going to give our state board update, and because we have limited time, I want to make sure that we can kind of get in his information.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Been a while since I've been back at PSTEB. Zach Hans, Executive Director for the State Board. Happy to provide an update from our most recent State Board meeting in January. I'll just go through quickly some of the action items that the board conducted in January. They adopted the Resolution 2401, statewide adoption and implementation of the science of reading. This resolution charges the state superintendent with several action items related to the implementation of science of reading in Maryland's public schools. It sets aspirational targets for Maryland to meet in reading proficiency and emphasizes the development of strategic partnerships as it relates to improvement on literacy. Another key action that the board took at their January meeting was to adopt a new college and career readiness standard as required in the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. This new standard lays out multiple paths to identify a student as college and career ready by the end of the 10th grade. These include two separate paths. The first is earning a GPA of 3.0 or greater and earning a grade of A, B, or C in Algebra 1, or scoring proficient or above on the Algebra 1 Maryland Comprehensive Assessment Program. The second path is the interim standard, what it used to be, which was scoring proficient on the English 10 and Algebra 1 MCAP assessment. Couple of other quick things that the board did at their last meeting. They adopted and granted MSDE permission to publish revised social studies frameworks in 6th and 7th grade. We'll be looking at the early learning standards at their upcoming February meeting, which they just considered in their Education Policy Committee meeting last night. On the legislative front, I know Laurel will be there on behalf of the department. The state board did vote at their January meeting to support Senate Bill 5, which is a higher ed guaranteed admissions bill to the University of System of Maryland for those in the top 10% of their high school class. The state board also voted to support Senate Bill 161, House Bill 200, which are alterations to community schools to provide more flexibility to LEAs to utilize, with certain number of community schools, to utilize funding at the central level instead of directly only at the community school. The state board also voted to oppose House Bill 138, which is a curricular mandate bill that the board pretty consistently takes oppositional testimony on. I think that covers pretty much everything from the last meeting. Be happy to answer any questions that you all have.
Zach, what was the community school? I don't know if you said a House Bill or Senate bill.
Yeah, so it's Senate Bill 161, House Bill 200. So as it stands, this bill would allow school systems with less than 40 community schools to utilize up to 10% of that funding at the central office level. Right now, they don't have that flexibility in statute. And I know Superintendent Bolson, I see, is there probably also in I know Pazam was in favor of that move as well.
Were there any questions or comments from other board members?
Yes, I don't know if you can see my hand, and I'm sorry if someone is has their hand raised. I can barely see you, so pardon my interruption. So I just have a question. Thank you for this update. For Senate Bill 5, the higher education bill, I was trying to remember that applied to just 2 institutions, right? Or was that for all? I thought that I saw Morgan and one other IHE. I don't remember the nuances of the bill, but could you help clarify that? And then I have one other question.
Sure, yeah, it's
those institutions, and that's what I remember.
Yes, it encompasses the university system of Maryland, so College Park.
Thank you.
As well as Morgan State and St. Mary's.
So it was Morgan State. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. That's where I saw those. And then next, 2401, could you say more about that? I don't know if that came to PSTEB or just a little bit more about that. Thank you.
Sure. So the state board has really honed in and focused on looking at ways to dramatically improve reading proficiency for students. This resolution sets targets for Maryland to rank as one of the top 10 states in reading on the 4th and 8th grade NAEP exam by 2027, and requires all literacy instruction in Maryland public schools to be aligned to the science of reading, to include structured literacy beginning in the 24-25 school year. There's a lot more to it, but that's some of the high level.
I'll take another look, just because the science of reading has a lot of definitions, and I would love to see where the state landed, especially given our new superintendent and her work. So thank you for that.
Yes, and I'm happy to provide it to Kelly to share with members of the board.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Zach.
Thank you very much. Take care.
Moving forward to our legislative, wait, does somebody else have a? With our legislative update. Oh, no. I circulated, or I gave Kelly a handout.
Laura, do you mind setting just so?
Sure, yeah. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Laura Kratsley. I'm one of the education policy analysts here on the Government Affairs, Education Policy, and External Relations title team. I work with Dr. Eileen, who's in Annapolis today, so I'm stepping in to give some legislative updates, trying to keep it high level because I've been in the weeds. So, but if there are additional questions that come up, we can pause after each and then just see if I can help clarify anything or circle back and give you more information at a later date. Well, welcome. First, let me say welcome. And two, I think one thing about this board, sometimes we like weeds. Sometimes we like weeds. We often have like robust discussions, so we often won't have weeds, that we have lots of questions. Just given our different stakeholder groups, so sometimes we like weeds.
And then I know Zach highlighted a couple of the bills that we had taken a position on.
You did give it, this is we have the handout, right?
Yes.
Okay.
We have only taken an official position on 2 of these. The other ones are ones that we thought may be of interest to you all. On the back, the last 2 bills just kind of dropped last week, and so we haven't had a chance to fully flesh that out with our leadership and with the state board. So just kind of prefacing with that as some additional context. So we don't have like an official stance on that legislation as of yet, but anticipate that it will be determined over the next few days. So we can get started. So that first one is House Bill 75, Senate Bill 377, higher education teacher retention and development program. So as you may all recall, in the 2023 session, the teacher development and retention program and fund was created to incentivize like a new cohort of individuals to pursue a career in teaching. So this extends that eligibility of potential teaching candidates to those that are currently at or attending a community college and pursue a degree in education as well. So this is one that the department officially supported. And it does, the funded or the development and retention program is housed with MHEC, so MSD does not administer it. But it does have an element that anyone who receives a stipend from this has to fulfill a service obligation as a full-time teacher in a high-need school, a high-need grade level, or high-need content area. That's defined by the department. It's based on where shortages in teachers in those areas exist. Any questions? All right. Next
I'm
one,
sorry, hold on, let me check online. Are there any questions? Wait, so do you have your hand raised? So I don't know if that's a new hand, old hand. That's the. Sure. Oh. Sorry.
all right, our next bill, Senate Bill 143, Teacher Retirement and Pension Systems Reemployment. This legislation proposes that any retiree of the teacher's retirement system was rehired. So I know schools can rehire up to 5 retirees. It removes that language that says at any school to then expand options for those retirees to come back and serve in another capacity. So central office or to serve in an LEA of that nature. So we did not take a position on this one. It was not something that we weighed in on. But if anyone has any additional questions. The more straightforward one.
Does it keep the number? Because you said it could do the rehire of 5, so the 5 is still set. It's just, it could rehire someone to be in central office. Okay.
All right, so our next one, we did submit a letter of information for, just to preface with that, we didn't take a position, but that letter of information is available on the Maryland General Assembly site if you look up the legislation and want to read a little bit more about some details, some feedback that MSTE provided. So this was Senate Bill 84, House Bill 116, Teacher Degree Apprenticeship. So it establishes a new apprenticeship startup grant program. This is housed in the Department of Labor. And it's specifically geared towards high school students, college students, and career changers. But it outlines some details for how this program could specifically exist in high schools. And that's something that MSTE was naturally more inclined to want oversight over. So this creates, right now though, as written, this pathway would be created by the CTE committee. And as I said, managed through the Department of Labor, which can allocate or award up to $500,000. There's not a new appropriation, but they can incentivize the startup of these programs in schools. It's set up as So it has to work across or it has to have a sponsor organization that works across 3 LEAs. And they must consult with the teacher unions and any existing grow your own programs that are already established in that region. It creates a pathway that would begin with the potential candidates starting as tutors and then ascending into a paraprofessional position and then ultimately becoming a teacher.
Oh, thank you so much.
It is, because it's an apprenticeship program, it does have to be a paid opportunity. And I think those are the high levels. And very importantly, it cannot alter any requirements of a teacher certification. It's as written right now, MSTE, and what we detailed in our letter of information is that, naturally it involves the CTE committee, and MSD has a position on that CTE committee. But we'd also just generally like to be involved in the review process for teacher apprenticeships, and want to be able to review those programs as they're being developed. That's what we had noted in our letter. So moving on, Senate Bill 545, House Bill 789, primary and secondary education, public school employee salaries. So this, to be the question?
I did. Were you going to the next one? Because I had a question about the last one.
The teacher degree apprenticeship?
Yes.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Thank you. I haven't seen the letter itself, but just in terms of teacher education and CTE, and the way that CTE, just thinking about discussion going forward, merges sort of professional and technical education with other fields, just because of the aim to offer both like immediate entry into the workforce and post-secondary institutions. So our state and some other states, we organize CTE in clusters, and this is outside of like TAM, but CTE in clusters. And so the agricultural education program is like one of the programs that has some alignment as an extension program, just how we organize CTE in Maryland. And so I hope the letter helps our stakeholders unpack where there's a disconnect between the CTE at the high school level and the pathway into teacher education. I just wanted to share that. So thank you for listening.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Kelly worked on this letter in conjunction with Richard Kincaid in our Office of College and Career Pathways. And so he, I'm sure, has his eye on that as well. And there's a whole section there that might be of interest to you that specifically relates to what you discussed in the role of the CTE committee and how that pathway should be built up and developed as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so our next one was Senate Bill 545, House Bill 789, primary and secondary education, public school employees, salaries. So this had 2 big shifts that we wanted to draw attention to. So first, it creates an alternative high quality educator credential that has to be jointly approved by this group here, PSTEB, and the State Board of Education. So, in addition to earning national board certification or as an alternative to earning national board certification, this would create a second type of credential. The language is vague as is, but that would be something that they give discretion to those 2 bodies and the department to weigh in and oversee. Beginning July 1st, these educators that earn either credential, July 1st, 2024, these would receive that $10,000 salary increase, and then that additional $7,000 if they're teaching in a low performance school. So that's the first part, is that it creates that alternative high quality education credential. The second piece is it states that it will raise the minimum salary for all public school employees to $60,000. They define public school employees as certificated professional individuals. We know that HOMAR further defines that, and there's some variance across LEAs of who is included in that group. But we did, in our fiscal note and our analysis of the legislation, acknowledge social workers, personnel, therapists, counselors, librarians, all those folks were. So Yes, that was the second big piece versus the new credential and then raising that minimum salary.
This might be a representative, but what would be an example of a high quality education, like a credential that currently would compete with national board certification?
I'll let Kelly speak to this as well. I know she had noted that there was a question of whether this was acknowledging other professional or advanced professional certificates that exist in these other professions of like counselors and social workers, or I don't know if you want to shed any additional.
Sure. So in reading it, and this is the second year that this bill has come. So in looking at it, it seems, at least to me, that the intent is to recognize credentials like the National Association of School Counselors credential for school counselors and the National Association of School Psychologists certificates for school psychologists. However, the bill does not define educator credential. And so because it is so broad, one could make the argument that a credential is a Maryland educator certificate. So it's just very unclear. And correct me if I'm wrong, Laurel, but I believe that for the eligible employees, it points back to the statute that that it differentiates between, like, Montgomery County defines certain employees a certain way, and PG County defines employees a certain way. And so I believe it's Montgomery County in that definition. They also include their substitutes. So it's just very, very broad.
And then my other question is, and this might be just a Baltimore City distinction, but to be eligible for national board salary increases, are there classroom time requirements? Like the 50% of time is spent in instruction, or is that?
This is not meant for teachers.
Right, but the current, so the current salary bump for national boards has a like student, essentially like a student touch hours requirement. So would this have a similar, like a case manager, for example, who is like supporting students, but is not necessarily like spending logged hours in front of students, as opposed to teachers with the requirement to be 50% in classroom spaces?
I'll take another look. I don't remember reading that.
I'll jump in.
Kelly, you said,
I'm confused now.
Yeah.
So we talk about the same thing, like Senate Bill 545 household, she says it doesn't apply to teachers?
no.
Right?
I guess it doesn't, this is like for those individuals that are not included in the career ladder.
Oh, okay. Okay, now I understand.
But it says it alters career ladder for educators established in civil. Guess I'm confused. If it also applies to,
Educated
Correct.
broadly,
Yeah.
not just teachers. Is that
but
what that?
teachers are excluded.
Is that because they're included in something else?
Correct.
Okay. So does MSD have a position on this?
We have not taken a position on this.
Do you happen to know if the state would still provide half of that salary increase like it does for teachers in this bill?
I've heard that would be something I'd want to double check on.
So just to answer the question with regard to the bill itself, I'm looking at the language of the bill. This is Senate Bill 545 that I'm looking at. And it defines, this is 6412A4. It says qualified educator means a public school employee who provides direct instruction or services to students in a public school. Qualified educator does not include, this is part 2 of that definition. Qualified educator does not include a teacher as defined in 6-1001 of this type. So I think that's probably.
Any other questions to be clarified? Yes.
Real quick, because this is the second year, do you know if MSD took a position on it last year?
I am not aware. Again, I can.
We probably provided a letter of information. I don't think we took a position. And to answer your question, Joy, there is nothing in the bill with regard to a certain percentage of time providing these services. think we're ready to move on.
Sounds good. So we have our two left. The first one would be Senate Bill 761, House Bill 925, initial teacher certification requirements. So this first changed the standards for initial certification for educators. It removed the mandate for teacher prep programs to include a component around passing a nationally recognized portfolio-based assessment. It adds, I suppose, so candidates must pass specific content exams and then one of the following, and they give 4 options. Of that portfolio-based assessment, a basic skills assessment, have a minimum GPA of 3.0 at an accredited university, or submit satisfactory evaluations from a local school system, evidence of participating in a teacher induction program. And then, so over a length of time, I believe it was 3 years or however long the conditional certification lasts. So they would combine those two, or they'd have to satisfy one of those 4 and then pass that specific content exam. The second piece of the legislation is it changes certification requirements for teachers seeking to come here from other states in which they were certified. So they must meet the qualifications for initial teacher certification instead of, I forget the exact name.
The test of teaching ability.
Yes, the test of teaching ability with that evaluation component at the end. So the law does explicitly state an intention of trying to make it easier to recruit and help educators from out of state come here, but then it does add these additional requirements for them. There's also a component of that allows the superintendent to make agreements with other states. And that would involve a lot of, with other states that have similar credentialing policies as Maryland, which would involve Kelly's office naturally and keeping track of what these systems look like in other states and to see where that reciprocity may be easier forged for the superintendent to make those agreements.
Interesting.
So just to clarify this, because this topic did come up in our last PSTEB meeting of a educator with many years of experience that comes to Maryland, but didn't do an EdTPA, for example, in their college prep program in the 1990s. This would then provide an alternative means of certification that grants credence to certain elements that our state is looking. Hopefully that made sense. It removes part of that barrier.
Sort of. And I certainly would turn to my MSEA colleagues if they can speak more to like the intent, because I have to question whether the language that made it into the bill really represents the intent. Just from what I understand about what MSEA has been talking about. And what we've all been talking about, and which is, making sure that we don't have unintended consequences, barriers put up. So the short answer to your question is maybe, because it does allow an individual who is coming in from another state to have a 3.0 GPA or pass a basic skills assessment or go through an induction program to meet that component. However, the way that the law is written currently gave this board and the state board the flexibility to say, well, we'll take a year-end evaluation. So it removes that. And so I guess it depends on your definition of flexibility. It also requires them as written to take the content assessment, which is not an assessment that is required currently. So.
Any other questions on this one?
If I may, I thank you for that sounded like Kelly's voice, but I don't know that to be true, but thank you for whoever was just talking. I agree. I also wanted to add that I would presume that because one of the options is also on this bill to submit documentation satisfactory to the Department of satisfactory evaluation. Oh, wait a minute. Submit documentation satisfactory to the Department of Satisfactory Evaluations from a local school system from completion of a rigorous teacher induction program for the lesser of, and then you gave that we will have soon the guidance for what that would look like from the state as we have heard. So the guidance meaning specific to the teacher induction program. So I just wanted to add that, because right now it's a little open from my purview, unless there's some guidance released and I missed it.
I can answer. There are induction regulations, Dr. Trail-Shockley. They are COMAR 13A 0701, I think, 1 or 2. And I'm happy to send those out. They are going to be revised. And a work group did meet and made some recommendations, and we're still working through those recommendations. But for now, we do have those regulations, and there is language in the blueprint. And I'm sorry, I do not remember the citation of the statute. But there's also
impressive, just out of nowhere.
So yes,
yes.
I was referring to the revisions that we discussed at the summit last week. The existing ones, yes, but the revisions, which I expect.
Correct, they are coming.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so that just leaves Senate Bill 937, House Bill 1157, Grow Your Own Educators Grant Program. One important detail that I did not put on the handout is that this has a $5 million appropriation. I believe I left off, but definitely important information to know. So that $5 million grant program would be run by MSDE. Collaboratives would apply. So these collaboratives would consist of at least one LEA, one union, and then a partnership with one institution of higher education that has an educator preparation program currently in the state. So this is specifically geared toward non-certified education support professionals, building up that teacher pipeline to help them pursue a career in education as an educator. It covers all tuition, all expenses associated with books, and yes, there was one other.
Stipends.
Oh yes, stipends. Yes, very important. So
I was just saying, and fees, which is really important.
Yes. So a pretty inclusive list of what this money will cover. The collaborative will support or submit a plan to MSDE to select at least one content area with a shortage of teachers, and then select a teacher preparation program at the institution of higher education. They have to designate an individual to assist teacher candidates and provide guidance as they're navigating this program. And they also have to include estimates of how many applicants they believe will matriculate through and graduate. In addition, they also have to outline how many mentors they think they would need in order to support those candidates as they're going through the program. So they have to submit outreach plans to recruit diverse educators, and then estimates of expenses, and identify one source of long-term funding that would ultimately assist beyond just this allocation from MSD. Do we have any questions on this one?
I have a question. So obviously this is exciting for LEAs and IHEs, in particular since existing Grow Your Own programs were either funded through some Maryland Needs funds, which may end, and also, or donor funds. I know that I don't think that a stance has been taken or position. I just wanted to share for comment as a position is being made that the way that the document reads, excuse me, is that the department shall award a grant for, and then it outlines all the great things that you just mentioned. And I wonder, do we envision that MSDE would, like IHEs would need to apply for that grant, or MSDE would manage that grant? And that may be too down in the weeds since it's just upon us, but it's just something to think about how funds are disseminated to IHEs, because it's a difficult process and it can be complicated, although the intentions are good. And then the other part about the 5 million, which is of course exciting, is just to remind us that House Bill 1219 did not reach all IHEs as originally intended. And I hope that IHEs that have are not IHEs with a population of 40% Pell eligible will be included in this particular round, because the last round, which we were hoping for, landed on many, which is appreciated, but having a wider reach will be helpful for the state. So as a position has not been taken, I'm sharing comments, hoping that it will move the position in a particular direction and add some content as described. Thank you.
Absolutely. Happy to share those. Yes, as I said, this one is fresher, and so we haven't had a chance to discuss it fully with leadership and the state board, but I'll be sure to pass along.
Thank you. Great job. Thank you. Thank you for coming. That's very informative. Update. Next, our section. Right, next item on our agenda is our announcements and communication update. So I'll just start. So for many of you who have been long-term members of PSTEB, our former chair, the person that was chairing the committee before I took on that role, Christopher Lloyd, did pass away on January 16th. So I did want to share that to you. It was a lot for me to kind of process and learned a lot from him as his vice chair during that time. So it was a lot. We did get the information from his wife, and so they did not want to plan or anything like that. She wanted to take a moment to kind of think about how Chris had a way with words. I did make a donation on behalf of PSTEB to one of the organizations that she listed. So don't worry about it. So I did make a donation on his behalf, in his name, on behalf of PSTEB in the organization. But I did want to share that with the board. I'm always like, it's hard when you read things for the email and couldn't decide if it was something to be shared in an email or was it better suited here, but knowing that it did kind of impact me a little bit more than maybe I expected. So this is why you're just getting the information now, because it did kind of take me back and just conversations and things like so. It was a bit tough. So I did want to share that with you that we did make a donation with P7. As soon as we get the, the letter that you did to acknowledge that the donation was me, I will bring that to P7 and share that with you.
Melita, this is Joy Spain. I missed the beginning of that, who you were referring to. Sorry, it was hard to hear.
That's okay. My voice might have got low. I'm trying to, keep it together here. So our former chair, Chris Lloyd, he passed away, losing his battle with cancer on January 16th. So I'm not always sure when or who was here when Chris was chair, but I did want to share that. And I was saying that we got the information from his wife and she did not want like plants or flowers or anything like that. It was a very private ceremony that they had. And so she did ask to make a donation into she listed 2 organizations that were near and dear to Chris. And so I did make a donation on PSTEB's behalf in Chris's name. And so as soon as we get the information, when you make a donation, they usually send you a letter. I will bring that back and kind of share that with the board.
Melita, do you mind sharing those organizations for people who knew Chris outside of PSTEB? Do you mind sharing that? Or is that something that we should do separately?
No. So I made the donation I kind of split it between the San Diego Zoo. She listed the San Diego Zoo, the Lab Rescue, and then the Montgomery Education Foundation. Dr. McGee?
Yeah, thank you for repeating that because too, I didn't hear it and I am shocked. I have to say the first thing I thought of though, when you said his name were his Chucks that he would wear.
Yes.
Every time. That makes me want to smile with this really awful news. Thank you for letting us know and for doing that on our behalf. Sorry, it's very upsetting.
It was a lot, and it was a lot to put in an email, and it was just like I just needed a moment to process it. And what I learned from him as chair. It was just a lot, like I'm trying not to get too emotional now, but it was just a lot. And so it was just like, but I didn't want to not say anything.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to something else. Other announcements or any other updates with everyone?
I have an update or just a thank you. I would like to, on behalf of the College of Education at the University of Maryland College Park and Nihat Polat, the Chair of Teaching and Learning Policy and Leadership, and the Dean of the College of Education, Kimberly Griffin, we really appreciate all who were able to join us for the Teacher Education Summit in College Park last Thursday. More information will come out, but we appreciate your time and your attention and your discourse, and we hope that it was helpful for you. So thank you for those who were able to join us.
Yeah.
We used to from time to time, the lady you had requested, that we sort of bring back what's going on.
Yes,
in the field.
absolutely.
And I like that, and I missed it. And I want to share something that's a little bit unrelated, but I think it's important to kind of keep in mind as we go forward. We're constantly asked why teachers quit, why we can't attract teachers, why it's gone off the cliff when it comes to recruitment and so forth. I was just glancing at Kelly's notes of the number of people who are on conditionals and so forth, and just the environment that we're in. And some of that I think is in our board's purview to solve, and some of it's not. But I think keeping track of the whole picture is important. And when we were asked to kind of what's going on locally, I wanted to share an email that I got. Because my guess is probably if you wanted to know why teachers quit, you could probably take one that does and just go through their emails, and I'll bet you could get some pretty good insights just at the emails. So I wanted to share one. This came to me, this was dated Monday, the 11th of December, right? And it says, this is from our media specialist. It says, just a heads up for your planning. Starting next Monday, December 4th, and going through January 12th, the Learning Commons, which is of course our library, will be closed for testing. It's in red. Dual enrollment students will be allowed, but must be totally quiet and remain in the reading area. No other students or groups, including those accompanied by staff, will be allowed to enter. Please plan accordingly. Your support is greatly appreciated. And that was just an insight as to where we are. Like, I've been teaching for 30 years, and I was here when we started with No Child Left Behind, and the 30 years of the endless drive for testing that's resulted. And I ran the numbers. So we opened our school on October 23rd. Her letter goes through January 12th, so we'd have 90 school days. Of those, 24 were closed, which means our media centers closed 26% of the time just to accommodate testing. And this, I think all teachers look at that and go, why did I get into a profession where the emphasis so much is on testing as opposed to good instruction? Now, all of these assessments, these are all important. I mean, they really are. And that's just to accommodate our state testing. If we added into it the SATs, the PSATs, the Accuplacer for anybody who's taking college level courses, then all of our AP exams, then our LEA assessments, of which you often have 3 to 4 benchmarks that you have to get in during the semester. This is just to accommodate our state testing. And it's not a result of bad planning. We have 1,600 students in a school that's 15 years old. We don't have room to put in the testing we need to do, especially for students who have special needs. So as we go forward, this is a huge factor. You know, I can assess and I can make a good case that every assessment I give is important to helping me guide student instruction. But there's a point where you can give so many assessments, you undercut the instruction, whether that's in teacher prep or here. Right. And I think that's part of what we deal with. Now, we don't have any purview over this, but to me, it's important to think about as we move forward. So I'll give you an example. As we go forward, we did pass that for the new requirement when you renew your certificate, you get professional development points. And we know that we're thinking about what we can begin to offer to help in those areas. SEL is one of those things. I need SELs training to help me deal with the stress that students encounter from this environment. I'd love to see a course help your students deal with the stress of all the mandated testing the average child has to go through, because that's affecting mental health. And I see it all the time. Maybe we need to build buildings with extra wings so we can accommodate the testing, so we don't have to close the library. I've now started to actually I started to go in, and when students are studying stuff, I'll take out the books, bring them down to my room, set up a display so the kids, because they can't get into the media center, they can check them out. And I realized it's a bookmobile. That's what I had as a poor kid growing up in West Virginia. And I'm running the same thing in my school because we can't get to the library because we've got a month of testing. So there's a certain culture here that I think we've come to accept as normal. And I think as we go forward, looking at how we address that based on what we can do, we have to keep our head in reality. You know, we just got a memo that we will need to hire 200 more teachers in my county alone. That's just because of the growth. And you look at the conditionals that we have, and oh my gosh, can we keep them? So how many assessments are we going to give? So we might want to think about what we need to keep on. But I had to report in from the field just because that's been bothering me in the shit. So my apologies if it took time. That's out of our own purview of stuff that's on the table, but I just thought it was, so I appreciate your indulgence.
Yeah, if I could just respond a little bit. I think. Right, we need the data. What we've done with the assessments, we've made them so high stakes, because we're misusing the results. You know, we need to get back to using assessments to determine if the teaching is on point so we can make adjustments and move on. And it's got to stop being, you know, report at this level, report this level, report this level, so everyone can get their piece. Because that's what incentivizes bad behavior around testing. That's what forces us to have such ridiculous. I mean, when you look at a testing manual for any of these state assessments, I can't imagine. I was a test coordinator for 3 years as a principal, you know, assistant principal, and I wouldn't do the job now. It's insane. And so it has a little bit to do with misusing the assessments, and no longer using them really for the benefit of student instruction. So I'm pro accountability and pro assessment, but we need to be using it correctly.
I agree, as am I. Now, assessments are so important. It's how we know if we're closing achievement gaps, which used to be the primary focus of these discussions, because we weren't and we needed to. But as I said, if you have too many, it impairs your ability to teach. So, but I agree with you 100%.
Any other updates from the stakeholder groups or what's going on in your area of the state?
I would sort of echo what Ebony said. I thought the summit was fantastic, and Ellie and I spoke briefly before everyone got here that it is something that I would like to see more of my colleagues at, which means we need to start the planning so much earlier. It was very valuable for me. I had a full team there, and there's an important dialogue, and I'd like to see us expand it. So thank you to everyone who is part of planning and organizing that. I know a lot of you are people, but that it was well done.
Did anyone have the opportunity? I know at our last meeting, Dr. Kirby was looking for some information, just how educators or those who work with pre-service or in-service educators, how they're using AI across the state.
I want to say thank you because I did receive some emails about how some uses of AI and even some concerns about AI, as well as taking down some of the notes and the comments. Some people came to me and said personally, I was actually in Annapolis Tuesday, and there were several reads for some AI bills, some through Delegate Young, Council, Mr. Sidnor, Senator Sidnor, and some others that they're looking to do with AI. I do know that they did receive some feedback from MSDE as well as some other areas. So it looks like at least one of them looks very promising that will go through at least a portion of requiring certain level of professional development for AI, but I will definitely keep you posted. I'll be back in a couple of weeks when they do another read of some of the other bills, not just for AI, but they're also looking at other ed tech type things that they're trying to bring more structure on. So some of them may not pass, but I will definitely keep you posted and have a report that I can share at the next meeting if they start to read and start to change up on the bills.
So Dr. Kirby, I actually wanted to share with you, I actually had the opportunity to meet with a group of young people, a group of neurodivergent learners, high schoolers, like I don't want to give too much information about them. But very much neurodivergent learners, very tech savvy, because I'm not tech savvy and I needed some help with some things. And so it's just asking them, how do they use AI, and in the context of like, how are you leveraging the technology that you have here? And so looking at this group of learners that are neurodivergent, something that really stuck out to me in terms of just having a casual conversation, because I didn't want to make it too formal. They were saying that when they have to write papers, they're using it to help them develop the maybe like the outline for it, because in terms of their challenges, that task initiation and knowing what to start and how to start it, finding it helpful for that. Some of them were using it in terms of like organization and time management, like prompting the AI to say, these are the things that I need to do. Can you help me, kind of come up with some type of schedule? In terms of this, how the students are using it. Now, I know some of them are probably using it to write the whole paper, but we didn't talk about that because I didn't want to know that. And then, just talking to a few teachers, just like I said, casually, like, hey, are you using AI? How are you using it? Many are using it for rubrics at the high school level, using it to create rubrics for student work, just kind of taking some of the workload issues out of it. And then another group, I'm going to say younger teachers with like 5 years or less, are using it to help them with interventions, kind of putting in, these are the gaps that my students have, help me design a module. I like AI, and so it's all about like how you're prompting it. And so they were very interested to know, like, but they didn't feel like, as the teacher side, that there was guardrails for it, like guardrails.
Yeah, and I think that's what we're trying to do. Exactly. I think the guardrails are what they're trying to do from a legislative standpoint. It is just the delicate line of making the guardrails and not choking what can be done with the technology. So, and I will send out the links to the different bills. And one of the guardrails that they're thinking about is definitely from the professional development standpoint of having teachers for professional development. There was one, I think this was actually struck, having it as part of the ed tech program or teacher prep program in ed tech courses. I think that kind of got eliminated, but they're also looking at having some type of pilot within the state or of a showcase. So certain districts and teachers can show how they're using AI and how it can be beneficial. We had some principals that even showcase how they're using it for strategic planning, developing their plans, going through data analysis and synthesizing the data and aligning it with the strategic plans and making policies based upon AI. So some are using it to a very deeper extent than others. So it's going to be a pretty exciting and also a challenging time. One thing that we're looking at is, I believe Georgia and some other states have integrated AI into the high school curriculum. That students must learn a certain level of what we're calling prompt engineering and it's machine learning to be able to do certain levels of AI. So there was something in the CTE curriculum that was mentioned in one of the bills. I think that most likely might get struck down this session. There are, I believe, 7 bills for AI this session, and one of them will most likely get through. I will send out in the email to the entire group the list of all the AI and just the ed tech bills that we're looking at, because TikTok is also come back up in terms of a TikTok ban on state issued devices. We're also looking at some different things in terms of now that Governor Moore has appointed and a new AI piece about how that area can work more with school districts and LEAs. So, and I don't think that one is going to pass because that has a lot of opposition, but I'll be happy to send that out so you can be informed about the different bills and the AI. And if one day anybody ever wants a quick demo about some of the things you can do with AI and a quick thing about machine learning, I'll be happy to share that with you all. Do one for you all.
Thank you, Dr. Kirby. Ms. Bobbitt?
Yes, good morning, everyone. I just wanted to share about the use of AI for instructional planning. So one of the early career teachers at my school, who I'm proud to say I have been mentoring for the last few years, he has been doing a series of PLCs for our school-based staff on how to make planning a little easier and maybe take up a little less time for teachers. So a few things that he showed us is how to scaffold like text-dependent questions, also creating anchor charts or graphic organizers to support with lessons. So that has been really helpful for me, for someone who is just becoming familiar with how to use AI. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah.
Powerful. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, any other announcements?
Just really quickly, if I can add to the AI conversation, I don't know how many of you are members of ISTE, the International Society for Technology Educators, but that's another place where we are moving to consider how the standards are written, because practicing teachers and pre-service teachers are required to align lessons and their curricula to the ISTE standards. We use them in the state of Maryland. That's another place that I think we can house AI, or the work of AI, as well as regulate AI and promote the creativity of AI. So that's something that I believe will be under discussion, or at least those are the conversations happening at the next ISTE conference. So that's something that hopefully can help the state move forward with this innovation.
Thank you. All right, approval of the January minutes. Since the material was sent out before, just give you a couple of moments to look at it. You know, if there are any revisions. Under the assessment discussion, when I reported the third bullet, yes. Actually, there's a couple. If you could just put T in there, Gartland. But the last sentence there, she stated that if an educator does not meet the expected score, they have the student do internal mediation. It's actually remediation, which is a big thing. Right. And then several down, there's starts with Miss Meadows, and then it just says, it's supposed to say July 1st, so that's just a typo. Oh, yeah. But the other thing here is that I think several of us obviously went back to our organizations based on the homework you gave us, and I don't see that that's stated in here. Okay. So it'd be really great if you just put in that you had asked us all to go back to our parent organizations and bring feedback for this. And then if I'm being picky, just under the action items, the first thing, there's just some typos there to approve the December 7th minutes, should be. Let me say that I've been on several boards in my life, and I've never happily taken secretary because it's a terrible, detail-oriented job. So I do appreciate work that goes into it. Ms. Bobbitt?
I was absent during the last meeting, but I don't see my name listed on the minutes.
Are there any other revisions? Minutes? Without objection, we will approve the January 4th, 2024 meeting minutes with the discuss revisions. All right. All right, so let's dig into the portfolio assessments. I think that was our last part to come back. with any information about the portfolio-based assessment? I know we do have the. Papers, no, no, speaking. Okay.
Pardon me, Madam Chair, is this where you want,
Can you talk louder? I can barely hear you.
Sorry, what about now? No?
No, no. Might use your teacher voice, even though you're.
Oh, I am making sure. Esau Certification Science, right here. So, okay.
Now we got it.
Madam Chair, I was just making sure that this was appropriate to talk about some of the public comment around TPA, or would you like for us to wait for that? I know it's generally.
Typically with public comment, we don't necessarily engage with the public comment, right? Like we don't engage with the person who made the public comment, but we can talk about it in the nature of our discussion.
And especially hinging on the fact that our homework was to get feedback from the
Right, I
parent.
wanted to make sure I was right, but we're not. So, yes, this is the time to talk about the public comment, Dr. Shockley.
Okay, thank you. Yes, so I just wanted to just summarize and consider some of what came to us in the written comment, as well as some of the folks who discussed the public comment earlier this morning, specific to the EdTPA. And note that, for example, in the MACD letter, as well as the other letter from the University of Maryland, there appears to be, favorable views around the EdTPA, where I think that loses continuity. For one of the letters is in the scoring and just addressing if that became, which, well, it already is after July 1, just addressing some of those concerns with the same agency, Pearson, as the national score. However, from what I know and what I have listened to today, the EdTPA has seemed to be an assessment that is favorable around the state, both from a practicing teacher as well as from individuals who prepare teachers, also known as teacher educators. Additionally, as we have read, I guess if there was to be an assessment that we would be deeply concerned, it doesn't appear from some of the letters that the EdTPA is, that assessment, folks seem mostly concerned about whether or not we can remove some of the Praxis 2 content exams that overwhelm teacher candidates as they are trying to become certified teachers. So I just wanted to just get us started with that conversation. I know that in the last meeting, there was some feedback as well, and happy to talk more about the benefits of EdTPA and its alignment to the blueprint, as it is a step toward National Board Certified Teaching. Thank you.
Dr. Zeppeli?
I just have a question. I believe her name was Dr. Hernandez Tittle from Montgomery College, had mentioned that they would like us to join the attend the EdTPA collaborative meeting, and I would love to go. Does anybody have the date and location of those meetings? Dr. Terrell Shockley, thank you.
Oh, hold on. Give me 1 second. My phone, of course, decided. Give me 1 second.
Of course. We can come back to that when you have it.
Any other thoughts about just the performance-based assessment? Yes.
So a lot of thinking since the last meeting, because of kind of looking at sort of a higher level. I mean, I heard two things. One, there was a letter that came from your signature. Where we acknowledge that EdTPA creates some barriers for some candidates. And so the concern is that we'll end up with more conditional teachers because we have fewer people who can successfully navigate those barriers. At the same time, I also heard from others around this table, and actually we heard it quite a lot in the public comment today, that the content of the work is good. That as a portfolio assessment, as the standards are applied, and the ability of teacher supervisors to provide feedback and be aware of the quality of the teacher candidates they're working with, that there's certainly benefit there. My recommendation, and again, this is kind of high level, and I think there's a lot of details that would need to be worked out. And I think, again, the letter from University of Maryland, I think sort of did a good job of laying out some of the barriers and some of the strategies they've used for addressing those barriers. I'd argue that NTPA, I'd argue that we shouldn't be focused on a cut score at the end of pre-service. That we actually consider using NTPA throughout the pre-service program. I think they normally start around the junior year in colleges. But actually extend that as the basis for how we support teachers in the first 3 years of teaching. So if there were to be cutoff, and I'm not entirely sure how I feel about sort of a hard line in the sand cutoff, but maybe we consider that being something that a teacher has the ability to actually continue working on through the time when they actually achieve tenure, because using these standards throughout the reduction period also would facilitate them being more prepared to go into national board certification. And the underlying premise here, I guess my theory of action, is we're dealing with a shortage. We want to eliminate barriers that bring high quality and, or for that matter, promising educators into the field. And we want to give them the opportunity to come in as promising candidates and leave, but ultimately achieve that level of success with the rigorous, support that we think that promise, could realize. And so, again, not knowing the exact things that would happen during this time period, but the short version is let's get them in and then help them get stronger. That the support of the IHEs in the pre-service is essentially doing what's happening now, continue to push them. I think even setting internal cut scores just as a measure of, their own target for success. But then we need to navigate the handoff to those who would be supporting new teachers in the K-12 environment so that it's more seamless. We're using their portfolio, not just through their final year of college, but actually building on that portfolio for the first 3 years. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here. I think it aligns well with the blueprint. I think it would help us align our support and induction greatly. But I do think, we need to look a little bit outside of current practice to something that creates a more seamless way of supporting and growing, very well qualified teachers and trying to eliminate barriers to becoming a teacher along the way.
Okay, we'll start down here and then go around.
Okay. So coming from Charles County, which has the highest percentage of conditional staff, I was able to talk to some conditional teachers about their experience with EdTPA and trying to balance it all of being the full-time classroom teacher and the college courses and EdTPA and the tests they had to take and everything. And there's very split opinions. There's teachers that came and said, you know what, EdTPA is the way I want to go because I struggle with testing and I was able to really go through the process. And there were teachers that came and said, EdTPA is so much work on top of the evaluation system the county's already using. I need just a test and to be done. And so there is this huge split. So while I see the value in EdTPA, I really do think that we have to think about it like our students. And well, for some of you, it is your students, but my students, right? My fifth graders. And my fifth graders can show skills in many different ways. And so giving these opportunities for these educators to show their skills in different ways is going to help us be able to move those conditional teachers into the full licensure.
Great point there. Great point, because I think we talk about as educators and for educators who teach other educators, we always kind of focus for them to think about multiple entry points for those students to kind of demonstrate those understandings. But then are we doing that as well as we are facilitating the next generation of educators? Very interesting about the great, I'm going to call it the great divide. Yes.
I just wanted to lift up something that was shared by Dr. Josh Michael, who's on the State Board of Education at the summit last week, and he gave us this image of part of what makes this work difficult for conditionally certified teachers, for pre-service teachers, is that there are, he said, the boundaries that go from like, there were, I don't know if he would say it's like silos, but the boundaries, the places where one person's or one group's
I wrote his quote down.
yes.
I like it too. We need to attend to the boundaries in our own system, such as the transition between internships and first-year teachers. Those are the places we lose people.
Yes, and so to your point, I can't see your. I think that that's another boundary, right? And so how can we really pay attention to these areas that are causing difficulty for whether it's conditionally certified teachers, for pre-service teachers, and then talk across the varying stakeholders so that we're softening those boundaries. And so it might be, and I think Dr. Bolson, you were sharing, we were having a conversation about that as school systems, maybe the evaluation systems, was that our conversation or was that somebody else?
That was our conversation.
Could be better aligned with EdTPA and national boards, yeah.
So similar to Melissa's comment, just anecdotally, we have a conditional teacher in my school building who I actually taught. So it's been like an interesting progression of feeling very old. But he had been teaching in a private school in another state, wanted to move home, what is like the perfect fit for our school, for our community, and dropped out of a certification program because of just the demands of, no one says that teaching gives you spare time anyway. And is also now financially impacted by that because without a full teaching certificate, he's not eligible for some of the ways, at least in our LEA, that you're able to move up your pay scale. So he's not only out the financial cost of program and the testing, but also is not eligible to have the incentives that are built in for other teachers to stay in the district through the union negotiated salaries. He's not eligible for. And so it's like piling on for that. And sort of more broadly, so Baltimore Teachers Union wanted to bring up the piece about the cost is that almost every IHE in their presentation materials is absorbing those costs for students in some way. And so for conditionally certified teachers, for alternative teacher preparation programs, if some of those in-district pathways take on EdTPA as one of the options, you are now additionally building in a financial burden for people who otherwise at a traditional IHE teacher preparation program, it's assumed that those costs are a barrier and are built into their financial aid packages or as part of the university system. And so one idea that they offered was having MSDE set EdTPA fees directly or have some sort of larger negotiating power if this is something that stays a priority of the state rather than each individual institution trying to manage those costs.
So regulating it. I'm loosely using the word regulating it.
Yeah.
But maybe the better word is standardizing it across
Yeah.
the state.
Standardizing
Regulating
it,
it's a little
negotiating it,
Standardizing,
sort of
like, wait, not the right
almost
word.
like the bulk purchase option,
Right,
if you
right.
will, right? To narrow as many of those barriers beyond the philosophical discussion of the value of the process itself. It seems like most of the discussion is actually the barriers that it creates beyond the actual content of the portfolio.
Dr. Taylor? Oh, no, Ms. Bobbin. Ms. Bobbin? Her hand is up. I never know if it's a new hand or old hand. Ms. Bobbin?
This is a new hand. Thank you, Dr. Taylor. I wanted to thank Dr. Terrell Shockley for lifting the difficulty with educators passing pedagogy assessments, and I have had that experience myself. And wondering, with the state seeming to be pushing toward teachers, requiring that teachers are nationally certified, it looks like the EdTPA is closely aligned to the standards of the National Board Certification, but it's still a separate thing. So I'm wondering if it would be possible for universities. I listened to the young lady that shared earlier from Bowie State University, praising her school and the support that she received. And it seemed like she had a pleasant transition from her education to being in the classroom. And I'm just wondering if that's something that more universities could offer to students so that the stress is not as much of a barrier. It is a challenge when you are a working adult and trying to take something on such as the EdTPA or National Board Certification. As myself, I am currently working full-time. I wear a lot of hats to support other staff in my building and to try to progress as a professional myself. It's just a lot to take on to try to move upward within the education field. So I just am wondering if there's something that maybe teacher preparation programs could offer to support students a little more with these requirements so that we don't feel that we are taking on so much on our own and maybe not seeming as effective in all of the areas that we are responsible for taking on because of the things that are required.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to respond quickly. Another theme that came up, trying to bring in the things from the summit, was collaboration. And so as I was listening to the public commentary today and reading the letters, it reminded me that I think that we could do a better job in higher education, but maybe also districts, and talking across institutions about the supports that various folks are using, to Ms. Bobbitt's point, and to learn from one another.
Well, I guess I'm drawing back to a question that started this down this road sort of in the first place. We've done a lot to sharpen teacher prep programs through the years on this board. And one of the arguments that sort of brought us to this point was, is EdTP assessing something that's already been assessed multiple times in the student prep program? And that, I think, is a central question, because if it is, then it adds to the burden of getting a degree in teaching. So and I'm not asking this in any kind of an accusatory way, I'm just kind of thinking on the opposite point of view. If our institutions of higher ed have a comprehensive program in place to prepare teachers that are using benchmarks at every level, many of which are mandated by our board and our regulations, then does EdTPA actually assess something that's already been assessed multiple times in the student? Now, we've already voted to add a comprehensive induction program every time a person gets hired, because we know the power that has in increasing teacher retention. If we add, and I'm not quarreling with you, I'm just thinking through, if we add TPA to that, are we now adding yet another additional thing? Because I'm just thinking, if I'm the teacher who's getting my career and I'm going deeply in depth and I want to get it in 4 years, and you've already got benchmarks to assess at every level how my teaching is working. You're putting me out in the schools early. You are sending people out to assess. I have a mentor that has high standards and so forth. You're assessing all of my lesson plans. You're watching me teach. Administrators are coming in and they're watching me teach and so forth. I pass all of those benchmarks, and now I have to complete an additional. And I've heard many times, and this was a concern to me, that one of the things that is a predictor of success is technical writing. And I was surprised to hear that came up several times, that one of the best things I learned was technical writing. Well, technical writing might be a brand new thing we're assessing that has to be taught in order to make sure you pass the EdTPA. But my point is, are we assessing something that's already been assessed? On top of the fact that if a teacher has to take it while they're teaching, because we're hiring people now who have, because of these, we're going to need 200 more in our county. We're hiring teachers now who haven't even finished their internship 1, let alone internship 2. And we're out of desperation having to put them in the classroom. And this is a county with very high standards. And so as a result, on top of that, I'm learning to teach. I may have 3 or 4 different preps. A lot of teachers have second jobs because they simply can't make ends meet and pay off their student loans at the same time. Now you add this additional, while it may be helpful, and I believe that it is it producing an additional burden that has already been assessed? That's my question. So, I yield to, because I'm asking it as a question more than as an accusation.
If I can respond to that, because I want to make sure what I share is misinterpreted. Kind of what I'm envisioning is if someone doesn't complete, if they completed pre-service program, but they don't hit a cut score for EdTPA, my suggestion is they should be they should be treated as licensed, because in the district, if I hire someone conditionally, they go in at the bottom and they stay at the bottom until they're not conditional, and we lose a lot of people there. And so I'm less concerned about the accountability side of this as the support side. And I believe building a support structure around the standards that are consistent between EdTPA and NBCT is more a way to, again, because of this push later for NBCT, if we're staying in that ecosystem with this set of standards, as opposed to, bringing in a new set of standards and doing something differently, that if we can eliminate the barrier of a cut score at the end of pre-service, then it's about support through the next few years. And I'm not married to the idea of there being a cutoff at the end of year 3, because that's a nightmare of work for my HR people and everyone, right? So, I mean, I'd like to talk about how we're building people up and keeping them in place. And so for me, it's less about the accountability of hitting that mark than it is about having a framework for describing the support we're going to provide. And like I said, when I heard from and prep folks who talked about this, it's a really useful framework. And so you're right. I think to some degree, this may be assessed in multiple other places. But the rigor of it, because when I came to the summit on Thursday, I brought a teacher who had just finished her program and just completed EdTPA successfully, and is a first-year teacher with us now. I also brought a teacher who just learned last month that she completed National Board Certification. I wanted to kind of get their experience with this at the same time. And, my teacher who had just finished National Board Certification is a 25-year teacher. Fantastic teacher already. She said it was the hardest thing she had ever done. But she really valued the experience that she went through. And so if we're pushing for this NBC and we need to get to that level of rigor, we need a way to incrementally support it and not have it be something that people just start cold with. And so, again, in my mind, building the support structure around these. So I'm not looking to add more requirements. I'm actually looking to spread the existing requirements out so people can get the support they need. Now, I'm not deaf to the idea that some people we just get through. So I'm also not opposed to other paths into certification. I'm not suggesting we do this, but I think to keep this in there, because it is a good tool, it does help us produce really solid teachers. So I hope that clarifies a little bit, where my thinking is that it's not about, I certainly don't want to create more barriers because I have enough. Because actually, I mean, this number here says I have 114 conditional teachers. I have 212. So I'm not sure where the data is pulled from or what we might have missed.
We didn't get to there yet. We didn't get to that.
Because I think this is probably bigger in this state than the data is revealing. So.
Dr. Gartland, did you have something? And
Yes, I feel like I want to use wait time for a few seconds.
Sorry.
No, I agree with a lot of what you said. I just wanted to go back to something that Darren brought up, just because we had this conversation last month. And you're right that I think I heard not just from me, but from Chris and some others, that we do probe from the beginning of their first semester junior year. And for us, they apply at the end of their sophomore year to get into education at Towson, and that may be different elsewhere, but so we get them at the beginning of their education major career. And we do thoughtfully look at all 4 or more semesters to see where can we start infusing information and skills and knowledge and dispositions about the EdTPA. But we do that in chunks. So we don't provide and sequentially. So we provide little bits as we go along, and as we keep the students progressing, the knowledge, skills, and dispositions they've learned from previous chunking goes into then their final semester. And so for me, next week we're hitting it hard. Last week we hit it softly, kind of, the EdTPA for my LED, special ed, dual cert majors. But I think the letters that we heard, and what we heard also verbally, but the letters we read today are saying that IHEs, many of them are in favor of keeping it because it's a culmination. And where the chunked assignments might be done in small groups or as a whole class with feedback from all of us. This is an assessment that must be done, that you are the candidate, each teacher candidate is responsible for making sure that they are doing it fully on their own, as are some of our other assignments, signature assignments, we call them. So yeah, there are things that we would like to improve. The money cutoff score, that's fine. I would think that, I would guess that some of us who are happy with the EdTPA might continue to have an expected score, as I mentioned last time, or convert it into a cut score that you must have to reach for graduation. And I'm fine, it would be great, it would be lovely for any of our assessments to be carried over to their first year. So that we have less of a boundary issue. But I think that what you've read and heard is that many of us are in favor of keeping it because it's the first time then after 4 or more semesters that they are expected to do this, shoulder the responsibility and be proud of all the things that they've learned and put it in this capstone experience.
Yes, the question that I don't think the letters have answered is, the institutions are interested in keeping it, but are they looking forward to the date that we actually have a cut score?
So I was gonna actually, before we got into that cut score, Dr. Beverly, is the president gonna talk?
Yep, that's
Okay.
right.
So 2 things, because I know we can talk about this for a very, very long time. And so this definitely started the conversation that I think we needed to have. So a couple of things that I noticed is that, one, the summit was very valuable to this board. And that I think if we may want to plan to try to be there as a board. I was out of town doing something else, so it kind of worked out that we had the meeting this day, but that might be something that we can have, we can kind of plan as a board to attend. And I know different stakeholder groups and different things, and for those of us who are on the front line, it might present some challenges, but I think it's really good that we as a board can be in the room and kind of hear the conversations that are going on and hear what's important. So definitely want to plan for that for 2025, right? Well, it's like, what year are we in? The other thing is that question for Kelly, probably in terms of like just the conversations that we've been having or that we will continue to have. What is in our purview as a board? Because I know cut scores, I was pretty sure cut scores wasn't us. But what is in our purview in terms of just a little bit in the conversations that we had today? What is actually in our purview? Because I want to make sure that we are focusing our attention and time on something that we can actually impact and change versus going through talking about something that we can't do anything about it. So what is actually in our purview in terms of the conversation about the portfolio-based assessment? I don't know, that might have been a lie.
No, so looking at what's currently in statute, what this board, along with the State Board of Education, has purview over is developing regulations that align with that statute, which you guys are, really familiar with because we just did that for a really long time. And so, for example, we have written into the regulations that a nationally recognized portfolio-based assessment, which the state board, I'll get to that in a second, has approved both the EdTPA and the PPAT as measures that we look at for purposes of licensure, that they can do either of those assessments as part of their requirements for licensure. Until that statute changes, then that requirement is what it is, and it is effective July 1st, 2025. So right now we're working toward it, and that's why right now we don't have a passing score set in Maryland for either of those assessments. But starting July 1st, 2025, what the law says is that in order to graduate, a candidate that goes through a Maryland approved program must pass one of those nationally recognized portfolio-based assessments. Now, in regulation, it also states that the State Board of Education is the sole board that approves licensure assessments, and the state superintendent of schools is the entity that sets the passing scores. So it's a dynamic situation. I will tell you that as we were sitting here, I reached out to our friends in Pearson, they're sitting behind us, and our friends at ETS to ask, what are all of the passing scores for all the states that use your assessments? Because that's, of course, is one of the things that we will look at. And, And we'll look further into how those assessment scores, those passing scores were selected. We'll look at data. So any data that we have from test takers in Maryland that have already sat for either of those assessments, I shouldn't say sit, participated in either of those assessments, we'll look at that data. If what we're seeing, and let's just say, because I don't know this off the top of my head, let's say that, the recommended score for the EdTPA for one of the rubrics is 39. I'm making this up. And we see that a lot of our Maryland test takers are scoring well below 39. And that's something that we need to talk about. It's something we need to consider when we are making recommendations to the state superintendent of schools on setting a cut score. So as far as purview, again, as long as the law is what the law is currently, that assessment is required July 1st, 2025 for purposes of licensure for our Maryland Improved program.
But just to add to that thought, I like that you asked that question. I believe that this board is unique in its composition. And we have representatives from teacher education programs, and we have folks who are current practitioners. And now that we have this invitation to the collaborative, I'm really excited here. I'm getting coverage. It brings together a group of people who have different perspectives on it, and we can give that advice, solicited or not.
It's all about, I think, as a board, because we are so dynamic and diverse in that, is making sure that we are in the room, and not only in the room, but also making sure that we have a seat at the table so that our voices are heard, because thinking about who we represent in our stakeholder groups, and that we do represent in any way capacity, like that first grade teacher who right now is teaching, reading, or that high school teacher who's teaching something. And so we have to be their voice and make sure that they're heard in the spaces that they are not. So, that's why I was just asking, what is in our purview to make sure that we're prioritizing something that we can elicit change if we need to? So I don't want us to go down, because we will do that. We will take this path, and it's just that's not where we need to focus. So I really wanted to know what's in our purview, what's not, so that as we continue to have the conversation, we can kind of be more focused, aware on what we need to do.
And we have historically, I think, as a board, when we've sometimes been required to produce COMAR changes because it's required by law. Because of our expertise and so forth on the board, we have sometimes created statements that become part of our record or shared with other people about concerns we might have because we're doing this, but here are some pitfalls or here are some pluses and so forth. So that's not completely, it doesn't happen very often, but it's something our board sometimes does, exactly for why you.
So before we move on from this, I do want to keep this in our running agenda for a while, because I think that the more we talk about it, the more we go back to our stakeholder groups, because we kind of have some trends, but we still kind of this side, that side. So I do want to keep talking about this and include this in our agenda going into next month. One thing that I want to know, I think I know this, but maybe I don't. What is the assessment progression? Is it Praxis 1, Praxis 2, EdTPA? What is the progression of an assessment? And we don't have to answer it today, but maybe that's something we can kind of talk about in March. What is the assessment progression for a typical candidate? Do they take Praxis 1, then Praxis 2? Then is it something else? And then do they have to take this? I'm just curious to know that. And so we can kind of table that and kind of come back to it in March, because I think this is too important for us not to talk about it. There are some holes there, and maybe we can create education terms, fill in the gaps. We like filling in the gaps in education. So I do want to keep this on our agenda for a while.
Do we want to bring the subgroup back together and just kind of absorb all of this and produce some thoughts? I'm asking that.
The communication group.
The subgroup that worked on the letter initially.
We could. Let's give it one more meeting before we kind of go back to the subgroup.
All right.
Pardon me, if I may, I just wanted to share the date of the next. I don't know if people can see the Zoom comments, but I put it in Zoom. There was a question about the next Maryland EdTPA collaborative meeting.
Speak up.
Oh, sorry. The next EdTPA collaborative meeting. Are you all able to see the chat?
No. The chat.
I can forward it.
Okay, I have it too.
Can you just tell us the date so we can have it in our minutes?
Yes, I'm trying to keep my promise. Okay.
They want to see the on there. Good luck for everybody.
Kelly can send it out, but what's the?
Kelly, you send it out.
February 16th, 9 to 10:30 via Zoom. And if the Zoom changes, I'll send it to Kelly to share with everybody who may be interested, but please hold that date and time. February 6th, I don't know why my computer's so low today. February 16th, 9 to 10:30 via Zoom.
So Ebony, I just asked somebody online, so that's open to anyone, we can share that?
Yeah. Oh, yes, you can. Yes, you can join.
Yeah, I think we can just, whoever is able to attend, let's go. The more the merrier. I mean, because I think that we have multiple people attend the same meeting, everybody takes away something different. So I think when we come back, it'll just be a nice.
So it's the third Friday of each month.
You for that. No, they really revise it. So third Friday.
Also, the assessment progression for the purpose of the minutes, if you want to know quickly, is praxis 1 and let's.
No, we don't. No. We're gonna table that to next time.
You cut out, so I thought you asked that.
We're gonna table that for next time because we're about to go off on that path. So.
Oh, yeah, let's not. Okay.
We're gonna bring us back. Okay.
Okay.
All right, so I think this gives us a good segue since we talked about barriers and what's impacting the staffing update.
So in your packet, we do have a new table. This is the number of conditional, we've been talking a lot about conditionally certified teachers. And this is the data as of January 31st. Dr. Bolton, you have not yet seen my email because I did note that yours is very significantly different than what my understanding was. So we want to dig into that. So yes, if this is anything, it is short. So bear that in mind. But right now we have broken the 5,000 mark for conditionally certified teachers. If you remember last year when we presented, you saw a steady incline in conditionally certified teachers across LEAs, across content areas, and that is continuing as we had expected. So you can see that the percentage of conditional teachers by LEA is as great as 20% for the seed school, and just below that 19.2% for Charles County. So almost 20% of the teacher workforce is conditionally certified in that county. So definitely very relevant conversations that we're having about conditionally certified teachers. We do have to find a way to support these teachers because they are who we are hiring right now.
I'm sorry if I should know this. What is the seed school?
The seed school is a state operated school. It's established in statute, and we do treat it like a local education agency. So they have to report all their data to us. I am not an expert on the seed school, so I don't want to give you misinformation.
Is it
The students do live on campus. It's a residential program.
I've written recommendations. And it's a single school?
Yes.
For
typical population?
It's almost like a charter, so they apply.
So you have to apply, they need letters of recommendation, because I've written them, so. They need letters of recommendations. I do know they applied, they live on campus, they typically come home on the weekends.
Yes, it's a residential.
I'm just curious. I know that they usually have neurodivergent learners there. Those, but
It's not solely.
And it's a typical high. Starting out with the one grade level, now I think now they have all 12th graders now.
So 6 through
12.
12.
They're awful.
Any questions about the staffing report? Any comments about it?
That's a lot of condition. Teachers.
George's County
That's probably more than all cities.
I think.
I was just gonna say, at least I know in Baltimore City also, this tends to disproportionately represent special educators as well. So when we're thinking about like a teacher, conditionally certified candidate who's been working on coursework and things and might give their students a project. I mean, obviously I never did this, right? But like, maybe you got some worksheets to do today. So that, like, just making and working on her coursework, that's disproportionately impacting students with disabilities as well.
That would be interesting to know too, in terms of that, we know statewide and the teaching shortage that population is impacted the most. And that's a population that cannot and should not, have, you know, I don't want to say a traditional teacher, but that population is most vulnerable to, you know, to this. And so when we think about things that are going on and mediations and due process and students not, things not being met in terms of their IEP, this is probably part of the why, and districts being able to implement those IEPs with fidelity. This is probably some of it, not all of it, but this could be some of the reasons why, just with the shortage. Dr. Zolke?
I just wanted to emphasize that in our conversations, we've been really good about not thinking of conditionally certified procedures as being just a one-off. Which is, I think, traditionally how it's been viewed is we don't have to pay as much attention to that because it's not as common. And this data supports that our attention to this is warranted. So for this data, it's very important.
And that we know if you've been on this board for a while, we're not able to replenish them. We're not able to replenish as people retire or as people leave the profession. We're not able to replenish them in the same capacity too.
And I think it's telling. I was having a conversation with the staff of the AIB recently, and you know, we were recognizing that conditionally certified teachers, there's really no carve out for them. They're not mentioned at all in the law. And you know, and the staff was very transparent that, you know, it just wasn't on their radar. And that was what, in 2018? So I mean, I think that speaks volumes.
Well, we saw it coming. I mean, we've seen this trend coming for so long. And teachers have been talking about it over and over and over again. And I think COVID became a convenient, we lost so many people during COVID, so many people retired. We knew people were dropping off the cliff in their enrollment in teacher education schools. Even the teachers closer to the end of their career were seeing frustrations in how things are being handled bureaucratically. We saw them dropping off and people were very vocal about it. And it should have never been a surprise to anyone that this was coming. And I'm sorry, I just feel the need to point that out. Because if we keep doing business the same way, piling more on and more on and more on, there are things that professional learning cannot fix. Because if the conditions are not conducive to a person's well-being when they're working there, if we don't solve these problems, teachers do. They solve it by quitting. So we've got to have a holistic approach to all of this and making sure that we're not adding on to the burden in the thought that we're giving help. Yes, that's my. But I feel like it's been ignored for so long that we just can't continue to do this. Not the way we're doing it now.
Dr. Allen?
Yeah, and I was just gonna add to that was a point that was raised last week, is that yes, conditionally certified teachers are, you know, one pathway, but that we also have to pay attention to teacher attrition, that the conditionally certified teachers aren't going to fix teacher attrition issues. So there are multiple issues that we need to address at the same time.
It's interesting. I feel like it's here. I feel like many moons ago, I remember having a toddler and us talking about that we would really feel it by 2025 and me calculating what grade he would be in 2025. And it's very scary to me that we are here. And like we've been talking about it, this group has been talking about it for years now, but we are here. And those of us with direct access and accounting points to the locals, we feel it and we see it. And so now it's just like, this is here. And I think that we're still trying to figure it out, but it's here. This is it's very scary to me. Like, cause I'm like, we've been talking about this for years. Like I know Dr. Taylor, Darren, like those of us, Julie Spain, like it's Dr. McGee, like this is scary. Cause I do remember, and Kelly, I know you remember that we kept saying 2025, 2020. I'm like, well, 2025 is here. It's here. Like, especially at the beginning of the blueprint conversations.
Yes.
It's like, it's here. This is we're here.
And I'd also too, that we still don't have in place a true instrument to tell us why teachers leave. One of our biggest mistakes is we just assume for a system that is so data-driven and I need facts to help me make informed decisions. There is no, in my opinion, instrument that is adequate in allowing teachers to truly explain the reasons why they leave. Exit surveys that are designed by counties do not get to this data. We used to be able to use a few things like surveys and so things, but those were so controversial, those were taken off the table. So for a teacher to actually be able to tell us why it's not a viable profession, we don't have an instrument in place to do it, but we could. And we've talked about that before too. So trying to solve a problem, we're going to fix teacher attrition, we're going to fix teacher turnover, when you haven't truly got a data-driven understanding of why. You just think you know, you're not going to be able to point on offer a solution. You know, like I say, you know, after No Child Left Behind, data should drive everything in education. Well, it should. But it has to be, as you said, the right kind of data used correctly. And I think the more and more I do this, the more I'm convinced there's just some kind of data we forget. And we have to get past that. We have to be more courageous. We have to know why teachers are leaving. And we need to know, is it because we've got a waitress tonight they're holding 2 jobs? Is it because we gave them 3 preps? Is it because they've got a class of 30 and they have 15 IEPs? Let me give you more PD to help you understand how to do that. No, you have too many. And we're not solving the problem. They're just quitting. It used to be 5 years, now it's 3 years. We need for them to have an instrument to talk to us. You and I have talked to superintendent about it and so forth, and it's such a simple piece of data, we need to get it. And I just don't want to keep spinning my wheels.
They're quitting less than 3 years. Some of them don't
Yes.
even last a year.
And I take interns. I mean, I'm finding PDS. I do placements for our schools. I see them all the time. I know why they quit. But we need to know. They need to know. You know, if we're going to go through EdTPA, let's have the voice of somebody who's conditional going through it.
Yeah.
Because that's where the rubber hits the road. See what I'm saying? That's where we need. Okay, so not that I'm criticizing who we had. I had great insights and I love all this. What I think is best about what we started here is a good conversation about how we can make this better. And I love all the feedback we got about EdTPA because it's so useful and it's so well thought out because we're going to get that. I'm just trying to talk to you.
That's okay. You're fine.
We heard a lot in the summit about the support, particularly in the last panel when the Blueprint folks. And I 1000% agree that is one of the big missing things. And just a very quick story, when I signed, the night I signed my contract in Harford County, the board had to make decisions about balancing the budget. They cut our 34 teacher mentors that night. Okay, now again, I wasn't superintendent yet, that was in June, I didn't start for another month, but I came into a district with no teacher mentors, so my entire induction program was gone before I started. We spent the last 6 years, we're up to 27, but I'm in a budget crunch again, and you know, that's one of the things the board puts on the list right away. Because they don't understand how important that part is, and it looks like people who aren't in the classroom. So we're in the street, we're dealing with these realities. Like I think a strong induction program that provides support and is aligned to everything else we're doing is one of these missing links, but it's hard to sort of politically make a case for that when you're in my seat, despite knowing that it's probably the thing that's going to make the biggest difference and cut down on the attrition. So that we're not hiring as many conditionals because, you know, I'm adding my conditionals every year and it's because of turnover. So I absolutely agree, and I think that's, I'm not sure how we would fill that gap because it's something that is in the blueprint, but we don't yet have an answer about how we're going to actually make it work.
All right, really, this is, no, just really quick.
Can I ask a quick question?
Hold on. All right, so we are going to probably spend, I'm gonna say maybe another minute on this, and then we gotta talk about we might need to adjust today's agenda a little bit, but go ahead.
All right, so I just wanted to bring it back to the value that our conditional staff do bring into the room, because our conditional staff are not necessarily that high school graduate who's going to college to be in a teacher program, but they are that graduate who went off and did something else for a while and has found their way back to education. I can tell you too, specifically in my school, our conditional staff are the parent that decided that they wanted to step into that role, and they're becoming a teacher because their student goes to our school. So it is really, really valuable to have that community and experience connection. The biggest thing we do absolutely have to do is build up our induction programs, because part of the concern is that if we don't have strong induction programs, our veteran teachers are burning out. In counties where it's a 1-to-5 ratio, there's not enough time to support our conditional staff. And so it's super important that we do value them and we do understand that we have to support them. So I'm glad I can just bring that up.
Joyce Spain, I think.
Yes, I just, Kelly, I think you answered this question for me when we did the crosswalk. I don't know if it was a couple years ago. With this chart, why non-public is not included on it?
We don't collect this data from non-publics, Joy, but if you and your colleagues would like to give it to us, I'm sure we could arrange it.
Okay, well, we did a survey. We did a survey as of, I had created one with Amy Alvoyd, and we had done one and it hasn't changed much, I can tell you that. But in 2022, we had approximately 800 teachers and 200 of them were conditionally certified. So just.
That's Mansaf, Joy?
Yes, that's Mansaf.
Not surprised.
Right.
All right, so lots to talk about today. So looking at our agenda and looking at time and being respectful of our time, we do have actually less than an hour. So I do want to prioritize what we have left in our meeting, because I don't want to restrict our discussion either. So in looking at everything, the corrections, Kelly, that's going to take us, like, you think that's going to take a half an hour?
No.
You don't think that's going to take half an hour?
Nope.
You think we can get through? So let's try to get through as much as we can, but that doesn't mean restrict your conversation, your questions, any of that. But let's try.
Yeah, and this is for discussion. I can always bring it back. Okay. Let me get you new copies.
And then this could be until, let's just take like a 3-minute break, because I feel like we have been speaking for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Let's say it's been a lively discussion. We've been going for over 2 hours and no one's asked for a break.
Right.
Really. Yeah.
With the paperclip, the big packet, and I'm also sharing on the screen, and if you're looking at it electronically, it's called 13A.12 amendments to correct and remove. Go ahead and get started. Okay. All right. So the purpose of this item for discussion is to review, like just like last month, we came to you with things that we had found that needed to be corrected, things that we're recommending be amended. We'll continue to do that. This, of course, is a massive amount of regulation, and I like at least once a week, my team finds something and says, because it was changed so many times along the way. Like just yesterday, we found another reference to a regulation that we had moved, and it was pointing to the wrong regulation. So that type of thing. So the first recommendation you'll find on page 6. And this is a part of the 05 reinstatement of an expired professional certificate regulation. And where it's, and what, if you're looking at either copy, the red and the yellow, it's just a reminder, the red is a removal, the yellow italics would be additions. So I have moved the exemption from B to C This was an oversight on my part. It was for the intention that that exemption would not apply to historic certificates. But the way that it was written and listed in the regulation, it only applied to the new licenses, the reinstatement of the new licenses, and that certainly was not the intent. So I have moved that exemption down to C, so it encompasses both the new licenses that expire and the historic licenses, the certificates that expire and that someone wants to come back and reinstate. Any questions about that? And for those of you online, please note that we can only see a couple of you. So if you have questions, please just come off of mute to ask, because I'm not gonna be able to see your hand raised. Thank you. Good. Okay. Next, if we scroll to page 10. And this is part of the pathways to teacher licensure, specifically the in-district training program. Someone pointed out to me that under 2B3, it appeared as if the intent could be that if an individual demonstrated their content knowledge by taking the praxis assessment, as opposed to having coursework, that they did not have to have a bachelor's degree. And that was not the intent. So just to clarify, I went ahead and added the language bachelor's degree or higher in any field, the way that we listed in 1 and 2. All right, next, if we scroll to page 14. And I'm not going to take you through each of these. There are probably 5, 6, 7, 8 places in these regulations where it still said certification. And so I updated all of those to licensure. So that starts on this page, on page 14, but it is throughout the 7 chapters. Next, on page 16, it's actually what I was referring to that my staff found yesterday. When, I don't know if you recall, but at some point we broke up the pathways and the types of certificates into 2 different regulations, and that's not how it started. And I never went back and updated the teaching endorsements regulation that points to the old citation. So right now it points to something that just doesn't make sense at all. So this should be pointing to the regulation for teacher pathways. And so I've updated that to read regulation 3 instead of 2B. All right, next. A lot of licensures, so let me find the substance. Okay, it's going to be page 35. Okay. I'm trying to think of how best to describe this. So for our school counselors, you may remember that there is a statute that says that at every renewal, school counselors have to have very specific coursework as part of their renewal requirements. And that lives in a statute, a Maryland statute. It's actually in the same section as the Professional Standards Board law. There is another statute that lives in a separate section that establishes this, what we affectionately call the senior teacher waiver, the senior educator waiver. And what that statute says is that if you are 55 or older or have 25 years of experience in public or non-public schools, and you have a recommendation by your county board, that you can waive the renewal requirements for licensure. So there are 2 different statutes. When I originally drafted these regulations, and you'll see in every single renewal regulation throughout these chapters, it says school counselors, this is an additional requirement for you. I was under the impression that that particular requirement for renewal could not be waived. And that was my misinterpretation. And I was confusing old regulatory language with statutory language. So I have sought legal counsel. And it is my understanding that because, you know, both of those are statutes and the school counselor statute does not say it cannot be waived, that we can waive that requirement if the individual meets the eligibility requirements of a senior educator. So I am recommending that we pull what you're looking at out of the regulations because it specifically says you can't waive this. And if the board agrees with that, and the state board agrees with that, what that will mean for our school counselors is if they're 55 or older, or they have more than 25 or more years of service, and they have a recommendation from the county board or the local superintendent, then they will be able to waive all of the renewal requirements, including this requirement. So that is what this removal is about. Are there any questions or concerns? Yep, that's it. That's all I have for today, for new recommendations.
Perfect. Yeah. Any questions about the corrections? We're ready to move on to the definitions.
So for the next two regulations, these are two of the three regulations that we discussed during our last meeting. So you do have a memo regarding these regulations. I believe at the last meeting, we had decided if there were no questions, if there were no concerns shared about like what I just went through about recommendations for amendments, that I would bring it at the next meeting and ask the board permission to publish. So that's what this is. These particular, as a reminder, these particular amendments are for 13A0706. So these are the program approval or the programs for professionally licensed personnel regulations. And these focused on realigning with the changes in the statutory language that came from the Educator Shortage Reduction Act in 2023. So we knew we were going to have to go in and amend some definitions. So we did that. And then there's some program approval requirements where we had to add like the virtual instruction piece. And so all of this was due to the 2023 legislative session. So today I am asking this board to grant permission to publish these amendments. Again, I think unless Chair Kitchen tells me that I'm mistaken, I think the plan was to slowly during the session, bring all of these things to you. And then at the end of the session, everything's ready to go in a package and we can take it to the State Board of Education and ask them permission to publish and then get it published in the Maryland Register when we're able to, because right now is not the time. So I am asking this board to grant permission to publish these particular amendments in that package that we end up with.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay. My question is specifically about some language. And I don't know if it was discussed in the last meeting, but I know we've been talking about it for a while. And so obviously, these we're already asking for permission to publish. But given our opportunity to provide guidance, I'd like just some detail on where the conversation landed regarding 13A 07, 06, 08 and the undergraduate teacher preparation program requirement equivalent to a full school year. This went under public comment for a while and back and forth. In spring of 2022, maybe when we was just talking about the full year as we were, and Kelly, you literally went through line by line. I don't know if you remember that, matching the blueprint language to the regulations. And so my question is about the school year, and I'm just going to bring up a point quickly. I know that time is of the essence, that came from some of the public comment specific to teacher education, teacher preparation. For example, if we mean a school year is the PK-12 school year, some of the language in the letters included challenges with housing at both the beginning of and the end of the year for candidates who live on campus, because the pre-K-12 calendar does not align with the IHE calendars in almost every case. And so the full school year became a dilemma and up for a lot of conversation. I think before it had like 180 days, and instead the language of the blueprint carried over to the regulation. And the other part of the conversation lies within programs that have like a dual certification. So for example, one of the critical shortage areas in the state would be middle school math and science. And so I don't remember clarity around whether the expectation was that the practicum experience would need to be equivalent to a full year in each area, or if it would just serve under the umbrella, for example, for middle school. So those are two examples that I would love clarity on as this is moving forward to be published, but I don't know what this board said about some of the dilemmas that had been presented over the past couple of years.
Sure. So just to be clear, because I think that we're going to have to kind of have this in two different threads, right? So today and last month when I presented this, I focused only on the updates associated with realigning to statutory language. So you're not going to see anything else here. So if the board would like to discuss things like clarifying language around the length of the practicum for dual enrollment completers or that type of thing, if they feel the need to codify those types of clarifications, we can certainly talk about that. But for today's purposes and for requesting this permission to publish, I'm only asking permission to publish the edits or the amendments that were reviewed last month, which are specific to realigning to the blueprint for the Educator Shortage Reduction Act changes from 2023. That's why I say, like, let's have those in two different discussions, if that's okay.
So I don't mind having in two different discussions, but my question is also important, and I would like to understand it at some point so that we can make sure that we carry it out in meaningful ways, and since it impacts so many of us. But I don't have an issue with having either of the conversations, but I do want it to be noted that IHEs will really need to know this, because some programs could literally go away as a result. Thank you.
So I would ask the chair, would you like to, I know we're going to discuss next March's meeting in a bit here, but it sounds like there's a request to talk about whether or not we should add language to this particular 08 regulation regarding clarification on certain items that our EPPs are requesting.
So I'm going to search my memory banks here, and I'm going to look over at Aaron. In terms of, so what we're looking today, because I want to make sure I'm clear what we're doing today. Last month, we talked about the alignment and the clarification so that this month we can vote and that we would kind of take it out piece by piece. Is the request better suited? Because I'm thinking we are going to maybe need to flesh that out a little bit more and just have a much bigger discussion and not cutting it for the sake of time, but just knowing how long we like to take to discuss something. And so here we're just kind of looking at those changes, but that's not going to take away our ability to talk about those challenges with the full school year, correct? Okay, I wanted to make sure I was clear on that. So Dr. Shockley, I know we talked about that 100-day school year thing in great detail prior to you joining the board. So the plan would be we're proposing, let me say that. We're proposing to approve just the changes and revisions that we talked about last month, and that we will probably, for lack of better words, go through this with a fine-tooth comb and kind of flesh out, because I know Darren, was that last year, 2 years now? Whatever, so when it initially came up with the full year internship, there was a lot of discussion and concerns about how that would impact the candidates. And so now I think we're finally here to kind of pull it out and see how we may need to change the language to address that. So what we're doing today, I don't think that that's not off the table if we are just potentially voting to approve the revisions that we discussed last month. Because I want to make sure that you're clear and not that I'm overlooking what your request was.
Oh, no, I didn't think it was overlooked at all. I just wanted it to be noted so that we could at some point, nor was I ignoring the request on the table. I wanted to make sure that we noted it.
Yes, because that was definitely a concern. And I think that's the hard part sometimes coming in with PSTEB, you come in at different iterations of stuff, but that was a major concern about what that would look like, how that would impact the students, the teachers graduating. I feel like Dr. Taylor or Dr. Dunn, someone brought up that the end of the school year is past the graduation date.
So I wrote,
Right.
yeah, so I was involved at least letters for public comment. So I know what was in the letters because I wrote them. I just don't know where it landed. And so I think it's important as well. And we can focus on specifically what is on the agenda, but I just want to make sure that we know that that's important because we would need to literally stop recruiting students and we would need to know that. So thank you for your help.
Oh, no problem. And just sometimes there's always a lot of moving parts to make sure that we are clear as a board, like what we're actually doing and that, you know, what we'll be doing in the months to come. So like if there are any questions, please don't be bashful at answering questions, especially for clarification.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just add, it's since we are taking this time to really, you know, look at the regulations to see like what does need to be clarified, what language does need to be changed. Like it is very helpful for, you know, everyone at this table. If you're having, you know, discussions with your constituencies and you have ideas about what that language should look like that's why we're here. So please feel free to come with that language or to send it in advance and we can disseminate it and we can discuss it. So for example, if we decide at the end of this meeting to have an agenda item to talk specifically about this regulation and what Dr. Terrell Shockley brought up, then please, by all means, come to the table with any feedback or language that you'd like. Also, keep in the back of your mind just the regulatory process in general. Always consider what you want codified and what should be left outside of regulation to allow for flexibility, because once it's codified, that's what it is. So just, you know, keep that in mind as you're having those discussions with your constituents. Thank you.
Dr. McGee?
So in that same vein, will that also be an opportunity or a time for us to talk about some of I know Deb Gartland and I have talked about this a couple of times, sort of like on breaks, about the catalog issues how this will impact college, you know, us in the university world and college level. It takes so long to get changes into our catalogs. And so, you know, my colleagues are asking me about, will there be a grandfathering opportunity for students who are caught in the middle once this starts April. So is that when we'll be able to have those conversations once we put that on for maybe next month? Is that the right time?
So I would say that the right time for those conversations, and certainly we can have them as a board, and my plan, and I need to talk with the chair first, but you know, certainly our program approval team is developing something to present to this board. So I think maybe Dr. McGee at that time, but outside of that, we shouldn't be waiting for that presentation. My team is working very hard to plan a tremendous amount of technical assistance and is putting together a tremendous amount of documentation, implementation guides, rubrics, policy guides. So I request your grace for just a little bit longer as we finalize those documents. And then certainly if the board would like, I would love to bring my team in and have them share a formal presentation with you.
That would be fantastic. And of course, you know, when Alex sent out that survey, my colleagues, we all came together and we actually filled that out and submitted because it was asking, you know, like, how can we support you from your team? And that was great to have the opportunity to put that in print to them. And yes, grace all the way. just, my colleagues are coming at me saying, what about? And I'm like, there's there's protocol, there's policy, there's steps we have to follow. And they're just nervous. That's all.
I understand.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so everybody clear on what we're going to do? Okay, just want to make sure. Just check multiple entry points, check. I so we get up here. All right, so any questions, comments? So chair will entertain. I'm like, go ahead.
You have your hand up? I did, but I'm looking at. I would like to move that we grant permission to publish 13A 070602 definitions and 13A 070608 state program approval requirements.
Second.
All in favor? Oh, wait, I'm sorry. Because we have people online, do we need to do a, like each person?
They can raise their hand.
Yeah,
Yeah,
roll call.
they can raise their
Okay,
hands.
just double checking. All right, so people online, please raise your hand, and going back to pandemic teaching, hold it close to your face so we can see. All in favor of the motion? Say aye.
Aye.
All in opposition? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Great. Go back to that good pandemic teaching. Items for next meeting? Right, we did both, right? Yeah, we did both, right?
Yes.
We did.
This was in the same document.
I was just like, we did. Okay, everybody's looking at me, and I'm like, no, that's right. That made me nervous. I was like, oh, that's okay, they both. Okay, items for next meeting, definitely the items at the top are call to order, public comments, state board update, legislative update, which will be important as we are in session. I do want to continue our conversation about the portfolio assessments. And then Kelly, what else do we need to have for next meeting?
Given the conversation that we just had, should we go ahead and put an agenda item for further discussion
Yes.
regarding 13A 070608?
Yes. That's the program approval one.
Yes.
Right, yes. So homework for tonight, homework would be, so this is where we're going to start pulling it apart and kind of looking at it in detail. So definitely take it back to your constituents so that we can start having that robust conversation about it.
I have two more.
Yep.
Recommended items. So the first, and I went ahead and sent it out as part of our package, just because I wanted you all to have the information. But we do plan to bring back an amendment to the licensure regulations next month that builds in, this is another one of those, it's a federal law requirement, and we knew we were gonna have to do this right away. We are already implementing this, and you do have a memorandum that was sent out in September. But I wanted to re-disseminate it because it is so important, and I don't think it's trickled down quite yet. But there is a provision in federal statute that allows for the portability of those individuals who are in the military, or they are spouses of individuals in the military and our teachers. And it is very specific about, there are certain circumstances where you can come into another state and you can get a license. Period. And it's currently published on our website. We share this information with our certification partners, but September wasn't all that long ago. So I think it's really important that we continue having this conversation. So you do have the memo. We'll bring language next month for you to look at, to embed that into our pathways. And then given the letter that we received from MSEA, as well as Ms. Sapia's testimony today, I have already asked Mr. Fitzgerald to do a legal review on what we had discussed last month, that portion of the disciplinary action regulations where we embedded the statutory language. So he is going to do a review on that. We will have to plan an executive session for him to share the results of that review with this board.
And we ran on a time too, for him to finish
Mhm.
the disciplinary.
And we can do it all.
Right.
He
Is that
should
an
do the, he
agenda?
should talk about the review first
Mhm.
Yeah.
before we actually dig back into the regulations.
So that would be on.
Yes, and so Kelly, can we put that first?
Yeah.
I mean, after we are called over, like all that good stuff, but can we put that first? Because I remember when we first did that, we had a question, we needed
Right.
to understand all the words,
And
we needed examples, so yes.
And I do want to just add, so I know Dr. Bowers-Zebley, I believe, had a question with regard to the definition of moral turpitude that also was kind of covered by Ms. Sapia's comments today. So I think the legal advice that I give in closed session will touch on that issue as well and be able to respond to that question. So I didn't want you to think I forgot about that issue. The other caveat I just want to give is I'll be working on this over the next month. I personally, my wife is due on the 22nd of March. So this, to quote, I think what was the band, was it Europe? It's a Final Countdown. So in the event that my wife goes into labor early, I may have someone else from my office who is here presenting kind of the preparation, the memo and the preparation that I did, if this is an urgent matter. If they don't finish or if there are additional questions, I'll be back. I'm only planning on taking a month off at first and kind of staggering my leave. So I will hopefully miss one meeting and then be back for a couple more months before for the rest of my.
We can zoom you three.
Right, yeah.
I'm sure I'll have. I want you to take your time, but I don't know if you want somebody else.
All right, so for our next meeting, I have our standing items, continuing our discussion on the portfolio assessment, 13A0708, military spouses, legal review. Did I capture everything? Right. Out. Well, we have 4 more minutes, so anybody.
Melina, you know better than that with this group.
Anybody. There's one thing, right?
So in addition to the updates that were requested about the program approvals, is there an estimated timeline for the technical guidance about the recertification pieces being sent to LEAs? I'm getting a lot of questions about when that information will be available to then roll out to teachers who are looking at a 2025 renewal date.
So a tremendous amount of technical assistance has already been scheduled, so it concerns me that that has not trickled down to you. So let's talk offline. Clearly, we need to do some more outreach.
Any other question? Because y'all packing all up before the bell rang.
Yes, legislative updates, I don't remember that being on all of our agendas. Is that going to be something that we continue to do throughout the session?
Yes.
Just
Yes.
updates.
Okay. Anything else? All right, so without further ado, without objection. I know, we will adjourn this meeting at 12:27. Thank you.
Do it, this is where we'll be. Yeah. We're very productive, so.
Yeah.
It must be the non-company chair.
Also, we